Alright. Good afternoon. Today we are going to be looking at Aegir and a variety of the new additions over the last couple years. It's been a little while since we've presented on it here, so yeah, we'll go from there. We're going to be presenting. It's going to be my colleague Colan and myself. I'll introduce myself first and then hand it over to Colan. So I'm Christopher Gervais. I'm the putative Aegir project lead. Go by ErgonLogic on Drupal.org, GitHub, GitLab, and pretty much anywhere else that I have signed up for anything online. And most of the time these days I'm working on various DevOps and cloud engineering stuff. Colin?
Hi, I'm Colin Schwartz. That's Colin on Drupal.org. I'm one of the Aegir core maintainers. I've been doing Drupal stuff a long time. Working on a lot of these things listed here, and yeah, that's pretty much me. So I guess let's get to it then. You want to talk about the history and then switch off?
So Aegir started way back in 2006 with a company by the name of Bright, who were looking to do mass hosting of Drupal sites. That was started off by a group by the name of Rain City Studios. That lasted for a while, but didn't really take off, and it was adopted by Development Seed. It started off as actually a Python script, and then when it moved over to Development Seed, it got rewritten way back when. It was on Drupal 5. So that predates even CCK and stuff like that, and you still see some of that history in the code base, considering most of the fields are actually custom maintained ones as opposed to using a field API or anything like that. Once Development Seed exited the Drupal community, Coops took over. Now Coops had been participating in the development of Aegir from back when it was at Development Seed in the 0.1 days. Coops managed it for quite a while, and then kind of became distributed amongst the core team, which has been the case for the last while. The community itself is made up of 6 core maintainers, including myself and Colin and actually John Pugh, who's in the audience here. So half of us are here. There are 20 or more contributors that are relatively active, so within the past year or so, let's say. And there's 500 or more installations currently, according to Drupal.org statistics, which, you know, it's a good baseline. It's not necessarily accurate. And that community is driven by a set of values and sort of principles that we try to operate on. The main one being to share best practices. That's kind of the whole purpose of Aegir, is to automate best practices and not have to continuously reinvent those particular wheels. The other aspect is taking a tools, not policy approach. So the idea is that we want to provide a framework that allows you to do a lot of stuff with Drupal hosting without necessarily hard coding a bunch of that of decisions on your behalf, and giving you the flexibility to override how we do things out of the box. And then this is all Libre software, free software, and the intention is to run it on an entirely free stack from the operating system all the way up. And so that's one of the things that's really key to our approach, is never to depend on anything that's not a free software package. Along those lines, we also try to take a fairly long-term view of the fact that we're going to need to maintain this over that period, so that free software has to also have a community that's maintaining it, and not something that's just, you know, new for the sake of being new. And so we take a bit of a conservative approach sometimes when it comes to the software stack that we do support and run. So here are some of the top organizations, well, not top organizations, but highest profile organizations that are using it. The National Democratic Institute, which is one of the clients that I work with quite frequently, they promote democracy in the third world and so forth. And so if you hear of American people monitoring elections abroad, they're likely to be involved in one way or another. NASA is one of the more interesting users of Aegir. NASA.org itself, or NASA.gov itself is not on Aegir, at last I heard, at any rate. But most of the smaller projects are. So they have a whole bunch of separate laboratories, and they have websites for like each individual satellite that they're running and things like that. That's all managed via Aegir. CivicCRM, the organization behind CivicCRM, the product, are using Aegir for their hosting of their websites, as well as offering CivicCRM to various of their community. CivicCRM is supported by Aegir, so that's something to bear in mind there. And then the European Commission uses it, but I don't recall the details, so I'm going to skip over that. Bit of a high-level overview. Did you want to?
Sure. Yeah. So just to talk a little bit about the architectural components and installation. So we have a docs site where the link. This is the link for that. So that should explain everything, the high-level stuff, where to get things, how to do things. But to, I guess, talk about the the high-level components. Basically, we have a front end, back end. Basically, so the front end is composed of, I guess, 3 parts. There's a host master, which for those of you that know about installation profiles in Drupal, that's what this is. Host master is the front end installation profile to get the Aegir front end stuff. It's Drupal 7 right now. There's a module called hosting, which is basically all the custom Drupal modules, or not, I guess not custom, but the Aegir modules to do the front end stuff. Like managing platforms and all that, which we'll get to. The theme for that site that you would use on your Aegir site is Elder, so that's the one that we maintain as the Aegir community. So that's all. Those are all the front end components. The back end is the back end tool currently that's stable is Drush. So there's a whole bunch of, I guess, custom Drush commands, and that's called provision. And so that does the heavy lifting for Aegir. So that the front end will, you'll figure out what you want to do on the front end, and that'll issue commands to provision, which will go off and do those things that you want to do. Now, so to install it, see the install guide, but a couple of options. I guess the recommended approach, I would say, is using a Debian package. You maintain a Debian package. So if you're on Debian or Ubuntu or whatever, just, the default way is just install that. There's some config options. If you're not on one of those operating systems, or you don't want to use that, then there's a manual approach. So that's all documented as well. Yeah, sure.
So one of the Docker containers work really well.
Yes, okay, so yeah, John maintains a Docker way of doing this kind of stuff, so feel free to check that out. Sorry I didn't list that here, but yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Yeah. So as you can see, this is a screenshot when you're looking at Drupal.org at the various projects. They're all hosted there for now. So as you can see, we've got provision, hosting, Elder, and Hostmaster. Those are the ones I was talking about. And yeah, so that's just to show you where things are basically.
And notably, there isn't an Aegir project. Right?
Yeah.
So if you go to drupal.org/project/Aegir, there's nothing there, or it might forward you to Hostmaster.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if you're looking for it on D.O, that's how you can find it. So we've got, as far as the actual entities that it's sort of managing, or that it is managing basically, are servers, platform sites, paths and queues. So just, I guess, to speak about those individually. First, you would tell Aegir about a server you want to run stuff on, like your web server, your database server. But once you have those defined, or you've told Aegir about existing ones, rather, you put a platform on a server. Platform is basically a Drupal code base, right? So it'd be like, say Drupal 7 at this point in time, or core Drupal 8 at this point in time, or your own installation profile, or Open Atrium, or something, right? So that's Aegir speak for. Aegir speak for Drupal code base is a platform, and then you would provision sites onto a platform. So sites go on platforms, and platforms go on servers. And so Aegir will help you manage the configuration and the state of your sites using these entities. And then there's operations are done via tasks. So if you want to say delete a site, you would run the delete task on a site, and then that would go into a queue, and then the queue would get processed as in order to get things done. So that's that. So here's a screenshot of what, I guess, sort of the landing page. As soon as you get into it, you'll be thrown into the sites view. So this shows you a list of sites. As you can see, we've got 3 here, and then you can see the task on the side. That's just a constant list of things that are going on in the background with all the tasks.
Yeah, so there's a couple of extensions here as well that you're not going to get out of the box right now. One of which is this report functionality. So this is a contrib module that NDI sponsored. Basically, the idea here, and I don't know if we have a screenshot of the view of a site directly, but essentially what's happening is that there are probes that are being run on the site regularly to check things like, are the modules all up to date, right? Are there any security updates that are required? There's performance ones. So this doesn't show it here. If you hover over this in the actual live UI, it'll tell you a little bit more about each of them. But you've got a category for performance, for example, right? So it's CSS aggregation on, things of that nature. And you can then customize, create custom ones. And essentially, the way that Aegir operates, as mentioned, there's this front end and a back end, right? So the queue is the mechanism by which the front end communicates to the back end what needs to happen. And the purpose of that is that the back end is operating as a separate user. So the site is being hosted as www data, and it's running on Apache or Nginx. And it's going to do things when it generates a site. It's going to create a database, for example. It's going to write a vhost. It's going to do things like that. It's going to restart the database, restart the web server, or reload it. Those are things that you don't want that user, the www data user, to be able to do. Because if the site were to be compromised, any of the sites were to be compromised, then you would have a serious security flaw. So what we do is we kind of whitelist what can happen on the back end by virtue of this queue system, where we're gathering the fields that for the data, things like, say, the URL of the site and aliases for the site and things like that. And that gets stored in the queue, and then on the back end, the drush component will query the front end, gather the variables that were put in there, including things like the type of task to run and which ones to run it on. And then that will do the heavy lifting, like we say. So it'll write the vhost, it'll generate a database, it'll create a backup and deploy it to a new platform, things of that nature. So what this provides is a secure channel to communicate with the back end. And so we leverage that when creating the report module, because we can communicate with the sites, even if the sites are running on a remote server over SSH. So we have this secure channel to communicate with them. And so we can then run arbitrary PHP code on them via a drush plugin, for example, right? Things like that, so that we can query things like how many users are installed. And there's this drush extension called Site Audit that provides a bunch of these kind of functionalities. And the report module integrates with that. And so it will run the site audit tasks. There's a bunch of different ones, and you can turn them on and off individually to determine the health of your sites overall. And so it gives you a nice roll-up view of where things stand. So this site is obviously okay. This one here, as I happen to know this is the case, the front-end one is the updates, the first one. And so this site here, which is the hostmaster site itself, needs some updates, right? So there's new modules that have come out with security updates, and so it flags that for you, right?
Yeah, so if you're running 500 sites on this, you can do a quick scan of this to see, okay, well, which ones need security updates right now? That kind of thing. So that's
Exactly.
So deployment strategies. Do you want to go that, or should I do it?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay. So typically, when you're deploying platforms or code bases, you generally have your own custom code bases you want, either custom installation profiles or something else, some platform you got from somewhere else. If you have a whole bunch of sites using the same platform, it's very easy to upgrade all of them at once, for one thing. But let's see here. Right, so, this is the way you would generate those platforms in the first place. So we have different strategies for getting your platform onto Aegir. And then once that's done, then you can put sites on that. So the several ways that are supported are drush make. That's not too popular these days, but I think Aegir has been rolling with that for a long time. You can use Git now. There's a Git module to basically you would put in a Git URL. It would go and clone that into an Aegir platform. That's probably the most popular. There's a manual way where you have basically stick a Drupal code base somewhere and then tell Aegir where it is, and then it'll know and it'll be able to work with it. That's the manual way, and we've added support for Composer. Thanks to John. John did a bunch of work on that. So you can basically, and then we added some extensions to that too. So you can actually go to, like, I think provide a packages URL, and then it'll clone that, like using Composer or whatever. And so we've got, by default, it'll run Composer install, right? Yep, to provision the platform. And then some extra stuff, we have a module called Aegir Deploy, which does the packages integration stuff. Or if you have just, a Composer JSON in a Git repo, it'll clone that and then run Composer install. So there are various ways of working with Composer. That's sort of the latest stuff where everything's going. So Aegir supports that now.
Sure.
So this is a screenshot of what that looks like with the Aegir Deploy extension, which I'd recommend. So, this is the create platform screen. So, you put in a name that's human readable, what you want to call it. And then you pick your deployment strategy. So those are the ones I just talked about. Basically, none is Aegir doesn't manage it, but knows how to get to it. You can use Composer, Git, a drush makefile, that kind of stuff. And then the information each of these needs will get updated when you select the right video. This is, some fancy JavaScript kind of stuff. So as you can see here, from if you want to deploy Composer projects from source, you need to know what the doc root is, where that's going to be, the Git URL, and the branch or whatever. So that's one example of how that works, how you choose your platform for provisioning.
Right, and that uses the Composer create project.
Yeah. Oh, right, yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that. Yeah, go ahead.
Private stuff too? So does this have to be publicly accessible, or is there a place to key in?
No, you can, well, it uses, you can use SSH keys, right? So if you're using GitLab, for example, you have a deploy key that, and so yeah, it'll communicate. So it can be private, basically, if you're using SSH keys.
Yeah, there's a couple different options. The Aegir user will generate a key automatically when you install it via the package. So you can just retrieve the public key and use that as a deploy key. That's one option.
Use that kind of everywhere for this instance.
Yeah. That's one option. The other option would be something like a token-based thing, and you just inject that into the URL, right? So in that case, we don't generally recommend that because that means that your credentials are available via the front end. So we try to avoid that. So we prefer the SSH key mechanism. The other thing to note here is that you're going to see that there's two Git options. One is deploy from Git repository, and the other is manage with Git. And the difference being that the deploy from Git repository, all it's going to do is clone the project, and then it'll run Composer install if there's a composer.json. And then it won't give you any other options with Git. Okay, so it won't allow you to update, like do a Git pull on the platform once it's deployed. Whereas the manage with Git does. And so they basically solve two different problems. One is a problem that's more of a developer problem, right? So the developer use case. And the other is more of a deployment from more of a sysadmin standpoint, right? So sysadmin is going to want to deploy a packaged system, and then once it's there, they don't want to touch it, right? If they want to do an upgrade, they're going to deploy a new platform and migrate sites. So that's one of the reasons why you're going to see two of those.
Yeah, to give some examples, like deploy from Git repo would be for production, say, right? You want that to be immutable. You don't want to be able to anyone run Git pulls on that. So this won't let you do that. With manage with Git, if it's say on your development environment, it'll allow you to, there's like a Git pull button so you can update it. But you would never do that on production because you might close your sites, right? So.
Especially with multi-site, right? So Aegir kind of bakes in this concept of multi-site where you're running multiple sites on a given platform. You don't have to, but that's one of the sort of nice use cases when you're running sites on Aegir is that if you have 100 sites on a given platform, and then there's a new version of whatever token or something like that, you build a new platform, you click a button, and it's going to migrate all those sites over for you. That's going to create backups of all of them, and it has a rollback strategy so that if update.php throws an error, for example, your site remains on the original platform, right? So that's kind of where multi-site really shines here, but you don't need to do it that way. The difference with the Git management of the platform is such that after you do an update like that, say you do a Git pull, and maybe another composer install because you've got some changes to the composer.json, all the sites on that platform would need to have update.php run. And so it doesn't provide a rollback strategy in that case. So the manage with Git is really more designed around the idea of having the platform and the site be essentially the same thing versus having this mass hosting framework, which is what most of the deployment mechanisms are kind of geared towards. So this is what the site form looks like. So
Create site.
yeah, the create site. Well, yeah, when there's some of these become read-only once you've created a site, right? But generally speaking, what you're going to do is you're going to give it a domain name, so the URL that it's going to, the main URL that it's going to be available under. Client functionality is optional, but essentially it gives you sort of groups functionality to allow you to assign quotas to different groups and ownership over those sites. Which install profile you want to run on, which then, depending on which one you choose here, it's going to offer you just the platforms that support that install profile. You can see here that we use a naming convention that makes it easy to determine which is the most up-to-date one. And then as you scroll down, there would be additional options, right? Now, most of the time, out of the box, you can only have one language, but if there's multiple languages that you can install it on, again, out of the box, normally you're going to have one database server, but it supports clusters and additional databases, so you could choose that. And then there's a number of other options that become available as you enable additional modules, exactly, additional modules and extensions and so forth to do things like generate a Let's Encrypt certificate when you do the install, add additional aliases that the site will be served under, things of that nature, including things like install CRM for me and manage that in various ways. Some of the more advanced ones are like setting the cron frequency you want on that individual site, right? Things of that nature. Do you want me to speak to this?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So I covered this very briefly before, but site installation essentially will, having deployed a platform, so that's the code base, right? That's just Drupal. 8.5 point whatever, plus whatever modules you want, whatever libraries you want, however you've built that with, whether it be Composer, Make, Git, and so forth. This is going to create a directory under sites / whatever your URL is. It'll add it to sites.php that's within that. Then it'll provision a database for you, write the settings.php, it'll write a drush.rc file for you, it'll create the vhost in the web server, and then it will restart the web server. One of the things that's not actually mentioned here, there is a drush.rc file for it, but it also creates an alias file for it. So there's kind of two drush.rcs that are created per site. One that actually stocks data about the site, including all of the packages that are installed, all the modules, all the themes, and stuff like that. And that's useful later on when you're comparing the current platform to the platform you want to migrate it to, and it can stop you from doing stupid things like downgrading a module or something that's not supported in the upgrade path, and it'll warn you about things like that. Or it'll tell you that there's a missing module, right? So you have token enabled, but it doesn't exist on the target platform that you want to migrate that to, right? And so it's going to be disabled as a result, and it just gives you some warnings about things like that when you're potentially going to shoot yourself in the foot. But this is essentially what a site install does, right? So it does all the heavy lifting of creating this. And these should not be foreign to anybody who does any kind of Drupal stuff. But the nice thing about doing it with Aegir is that it takes 15 to 30 seconds instead of a while, depending on how long that could be. Or obviously you have a bunch of shell scripts that are doing this kind of thing for you. It standardizes it and gives you a nice UI for it and things of that nature. So this is what a site looks like once it's provisioned. So here again, we have the report. So this is the part that's not out of the box, but you can see that this is a roll-up of that report. I don't know if we have visibility of it lower down.
Yeah, it would have been too.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of information that we put on here. Bear in mind that most of this is written by sysadmins, so we kind of like just throw everything on the wall. it's not very user-friendly.
Yeah, this gets broken down here. That's
Yeah.
what he means, yeah.
Yeah, so in this case, the report will give you sort of, it rolls up the worst case entry for health, right? Health will be things like, are the sites up, the modules up to date and things of that nature. Then you've got a link to go to the site. Then you've got a bunch of information about it, when it was last verified, the verification process. These are tasks that you run on here. The task that you're going to see happening most is verify site or verify platform. Verify basically is going to ensure that all the file permissions are correct, all the file ownership is correct, that the web user has right access to the files directory, things of that nature. So it's going to verify that the site is operating.
Rewrite the configuration, like the vhost and stuff like that.
Right. It'll update. It'll update the vhost or it'll update the settings.php depending on the case if there's a need. It's intended to be mostly a null-opt. Like it's not supposed to actually change anything. It's supposed to just ensure that everything is correct, that everything is working. And so that being the case, we report on the last time that it was verified so that we know if there's something that's a little wonky with the site, maybe just run a verify tag and chances are it's going to fix it, right? So something might have been uploaded to the site with incorrect permissions, and that might be causing some problems where the image that's linked to it on a particular page is showing, isn't showing properly, and that's because the www data user can't read it or whatever the case may be. Verify ought to fix that. And then, just a bunch of metadata, what platform it's installed on, what the install profile was, the language, the current status, whether it's enabled or disabled, which database server it's running on, name of the database, so that if you wanted to, you could find it in something like PHP MySQL, MyAdmin, rather, and so forth, whether encryption is on, required, and so forth. So there's a bunch of stuff about the site. And then this is the main control components where you can run various tasks. And so, as we mentioned, there's already the install that's happened to verify. You can run backups manually. We also have a set of queues that run on a more of a cron basis. So you can automatically run backups every night and things of that nature. So while you can run it manually, there's a bunch of other things that we can do on that basis. Cloning the site will make a copy of the site. You can delete the site, disable it, reset the password. If you reset the password, this becomes, instead of go to the site, it becomes log into the site, right? So that's just a handy thing. If you don't have backend access for the moment, you can't run Drush ULI. That's basically what that's doing. And then here's where we get into running probes, is what's going to update the report entries. And then you've got things like sync data, where if you have multiple environments, you can copy the database and files between them and things of that nature. So a number of these, including sync data, run probes, and a couple of others are not out of the box and would be things that would have to be added to the
Yeah, just like Drupal core, where there are contrib modules, you can use to extend it. It's the same with Aegir. We also have our own bunch of contrib modules. A library, there's a page in documentation with all the extensions that you can add, or modules, that kind of things, to do additional things that don't ship with Aegir core. So some of these things are here. So yeah.
And so while the way this works is when you click run, what it's going to do is it's going to queue the task, right? So the task is then going to be picked up by the backend, run as a drush task, and then the result of that drush. So if you were to run it manually, you would see a bunch of output on your inner terminal. That gets captured and piped back into the front end, and when you click view, you actually get a view of all of that. So it gives you a nice idea of what's happening on the back end whenever you run any of these. You want to speak to some of this?
Sure, yeah. So just discussing site or platform migration. So when we talk about migration in Aegir, that's usually dealing with updates. So there's a new security update for Drupal. So what you want to do is you want to provision that new code base with the updates, the security updates, and then move or migrate your sites from the existing platform it's on to the new one, which has all the new fixes. So So we use the term migration for that. You have your existing one, create a new one, and then you migrate the old stuff over to the new stuff. So the way that process works, first it creates a backup of the existing site or sites. Then it'll deploy a new site from that backup. It'll rewrite the file paths in the database, runs update.php, and rewrites the vhost. So all the things you need to do, it'll do that for you. if the notable features, there's a rollback mechanism. So if it tries to do any of those things and any of them fail, it'll just revert back to what the original site was doing. So the cool thing is you don't actually switch everything over until after it tries setting up the backup somewhere else while the old site's still active. So it just throws away all the new stuff it tried to do, and you just stay with the old site. Right? So that's a nice rollback mechanism that Aegir provides. The other cool thing, now when we talk about Aegir, one of the selling points often is you can upgrade 200 sites at once. The way that works is if you had 200 sites on a single platform, you can actually, instead of just migrating a single site, you can run a migrate operation on the platform, and then all of the sites on it will get migrated, right? So if you click migrate on a platform, all the sites will run through all these. They'll each do that, right? So you hit go, and you'll see 200 sites just go through this process in serial. It might take a while because it's doing a lot of checking, making sure everything's okay, but it should complete it, assuming everything's working properly. And if any of them do fail, they'll still be on the old platform. The ones that succeeded will be on the new one. Then you can go back to the original platform and see what failed and everything, figure that out, and then try it again later. So that's
this migration approach to updates, while particularly poorly named in this case, it describes what it's doing as opposed to the effect that it has, right, or the goal that you have when you trigger one. So it's better to think of them as updates, and we do now have, via some extensions, an update button, right, that makes it a little bit clearer that that's what it's doing. And it gives you a little bit more control over how you're going to do the upgrades and be able to understand that there's a relationship between this version, this platform, and this other platform, right? That they're two versions of the same application, essentially. Whereas in Drupal core, it doesn't kind of maintain that metadata that there's that relationship. So it kind of depends on your naming conventions by default. This migration approach is what's currently referred to as a blue-green update process, right? So you might be seeing that in a lot of Docker-based things, for example, where you spin up a new Docker container with your updates, and you check that that's working, and then you rewrite your routing to point to the new one, right? And then you tear down the old one. So it's an approach that is becoming more adopted more broadly, but it's been something that was core to Aegir for going on 10 years now, if not more. All right, so this is basically what it looks like when you're doing a migration at the, is this a site?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it basically offers which platforms are available, and this is where we were saying that you need to name your platforms effectively to make it easy for you to determine which one to migrate to. And then another thing that Aegir has that is a little bit weird is that if you migrate to the same platforms but change the domain name, that's how you accomplish a rename of a site. So it's completely unintuitive, and nobody ever figures this out, and we always answer this question, and for some reason we still haven't written a rename task. But there you go. That's essentially, it does give you the ability to do so, it's just a little unintuitive.
Right, like you would leave this radio where it is, and just change this. Say, you wanted to call it something else, you just edit this, hit migrate, and then it would just rename the existing site. So you have it would be existed a new URL.
I actually fixed this in dev shop by just doing a little form alter.
Okay.
It just does like migrate and then like a get variable. So we can probably get it into core.
It's not hard. We haven't done it.
Yeah. No, I don't. It's already in there. I added it.
Great.
It didn't need a separate task because I just form altered the migrate.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily the best solution because you still get the migrate task existing just to rename the site.
Right. Well, but you do actually still want to run a migrate though, right? In that you're still going to be doing database updates where, like, if you've got a link to the path of the site and you want to change that, that's one of the things that we do during a migrate. And anytime you're going to be rewriting the database programmatically, you want to have a backup. And so that's, and it's going to run update.php on this if there's a need to. So there's a number of reasons why you would still want to run it as a migrate task. But yeah, definitely unintuitive when it comes to, it's like I say, we're kind of sysadmins and we're lazy on some of that stuff, right? Like, it works. It's just a matter of you need to know it. There's that tribal knowledge that we just assume.
We need more UX help.
There's a open collective page that you can all go give money to have us fix these things faster.
There you go. It hasn't been a priority for us. That's all it comes down to, right? We've been working on other things that we think are more important, like Let's Encrypt support, right? Which, I mean, if you have to balance between those two, I think definitely it weighs on.
That issue had a lot of watchers that free HTTPS cert, so that's the kind of thing we got to first.
Yeah.
What, you want to talk about the infrastructure tools? Yeah, I don't think I've used any of the web cluster pack stuff.
Right, so out of the box, Aegir is going to install on a single site. It's going to run the database and the web server locally. But it has a variety of high performance and high availability functionality. Okay, so again, it's not enabled out of the box, but it does come as part of core. And there's basically two approaches to this. One is the cluster, and then the other is the pack. And the way this works is that a cluster will support multiple servers, right? So instead of having one web server, you've got, say, 4 web servers that you want to have the site be able to respond from. What it's going to do is sync out the platform to each of those so that you've got a common platform on all of them. And it will also sync all of the web components, the sites.php, settings.php, and so forth, to those sites. The challenge there is that the local file store can't be synced fast enough across that kind of mechanism, right? So if I upload an image and it hits web server 1, and then the page refreshes after that and it's on web server 3, web server 3 is not going to see it yet, right? If you have something like just rsync or something like that. So generally what we want to do in that case is have something like S3 where you're moving the file store off of the servers and you're actually uploading to S3 directly, and then serving your files from S3 as well, right? So you're moving the file store off, and that solves that problem. I have deployed this kind of thing in really high availability scenarios where an entire data center could go down and everything would just keep functioning, right? You would see one user would see one page down with a 503 or a 404 or something like that, and then everything would flow into the other servers. So that's definitely it's not used very many times. Like a lot of people use the single server, and that's the extent of it. But I have deployed that kind of thing repeatedly and reliably, and I'm really happy with that functionality. That's my preference in terms of these two mechanisms because of how it allows that. And there's no dependence in that case on the WAN or the network being up and operational, right? Like you need it to be, to some extent, the Webpack mechanism solves the problem in a different way. So instead of moving to an entirely separate data store, like block store, like S3, what it does is it mounts via NFS onto all of the web servers. So when you upload to server 1, that ends up on an NFS drive that is available to everyone else at the same time, right? The problem there is that when you split it across 2 data centers, then you're going to have only one of those data centers be the NFS server. And so if you lose connectivity to that, then you're not going to have availability from the remaining sites that are up, right? And so that works very well in a single data center scenario, right? It's an easier to deploy thing. S3 has to be implemented at the site level, right? The site has to support the fact that you're going to be uploading your files directly to S3. Now, there are Drupal modules that do this. They're not hard to deploy. In fact, we have code within some extensions within Aegir that will do things like deploy the credentials that are required for S3 to sites. So it just automatically does everything for you. You just need to put it in at a form field on the Aegir side. But if you're not in a scenario where you need that super high availability where, like, you know, a lightning strike takes out a data center, then Webpack is another good option, certainly from a high performance standpoint, because you just get, you know, you can scale out very easily on that side. So load balancing and the reverse proxy or caching that is a requirement for these high availability and high performance systems like that are not directly managed by Aegir. Aegir plays very well with them, so I usually prefer Varnish for that kind of thing, but Nginx is also another popular option, Pound and a few other things depending on what you're trying to accomplish. There have been some efforts to integrate that into Aegir, but they haven't really reached anywhere near maturity on that. And then the other component is the one that I've kind of been pointing out, which is that site auditing, monitoring, and reporting. So that's integrated when you're looking at it. If there's a queue that's going to run these probes, it's split up into different components because you might want to be gathering that data but display it in some other way rather than have it all be munched together like that. So that's another thing that I find particularly useful when it comes to this kind of stuff. So obviously, on Wednesdays you're paying attention to see when there's going to be some module that that's going to force you to go and do a bunch of updates. But this is a good way to kind of keep track of that kind of thing, know when somebody turned on develop on a site, for example, on a production site. This will flag it for you. So it's useful from a production standpoint, definitely.
Yeah, so speaking about DevOps here, you can do great things like automating your workflows across your environments, like development, testing, staging, production, all that stuff. But what I typically recommend is you would set up 3 Aegir instances, like for each environment, like dev, staging, and prod. And then there's a module called remote site import, right?
Yeah, remote import.
Remote import. Just got lost there. So what that allows you to do is pull in sites from other Aegir installations. So you have the 3 Aegir setups, and say you're on staging and you want to get a new version of the staging site on production, you would pull in the production version of the site into your staging environment, and there you go. So you can think of that like some of the Drupal hosting companies have drag and drop. So I'm not sure if the Open Dev Shop stuff does it. I think it does. The drag and drop.
Hosting sync.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So remote import and hosting sync are pretty similar. The web UI is better for remote import. I think you don't need to go to the command line. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. That's a way to get things between environments. Dev Shop, which just mentioned, that has a really nice UI on top of all of this stuff, which lets you do drag and drop kind of things. Boa Octopus are, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Like if you want to run your own Aegir hosting company, so if anyone knows Omega8.cc, they're a Drupal hosting company, that's their thing. So they provide, Aegir hosting as a service, basically. So that's the stack that they use to run all their stuff, like their internet providing services. So that's another thing that runs on top of Aegir, like DevShop. Then you can also have your own custom workflows. So everything in Aegir, there's an API for it. So you can figure out how to integrate your stuff with its stuff through the API. You can write your own code, write your own modules. There's documentation for that. So that's how all these other things work.
So on that basis, one of the things that I have done in the past is using Git as the basis for deploying custom code on sites. And there's a little module I added at some point that basically will track the environment and map the environment to the Git branch. So you have a staging branch, you have a development branch, you have a production branch. And that would then integrate with the environment module in the Drupals that are being hosted so that the admin menu will be blue on dev and red in production and stuff, just to give you, because otherwise the sites look essentially identical, and unless you're looking very carefully at the URL, it's very easy to get confused about that. So some of the things that you can do with that is essentially that level of integration where it will switch the environment in settings.php so that the environment module will be able to pick that up and display that differently for you to make it a little clearer what's going on there. Again, a lot of that stuff is automated in DevShop, but something that you can kind of deploy via convention, understanding that branch naming is important when it comes to this kind of thing, for example, right? So that's not necessarily enforced in the UI out of the box, but it's definitely something that's available.
Let me just understand, in DevShop, you have command line ability to migrate stuff between dev, test, and prod?
Well, that's all of Aegir has that. I mean, because it's all Drush, you have all Drush aliases for everything. So you can use the standard Drush SQL sync commands. Mm-hmm. And then there's a hosting sync module, which is available on both, which puts it in the UI. Click copy database from this site to that site.
Okay.
So we've got a bunch of module suites that can do cool things. Sort of, big heavy lifters. So one of the packages is Web Services Suite. So that provides a RESTful API for everything that Aegir does, basically. So one use case for that, which is actually a submodule, is called Aegir SaaS. So that is basically for site factory type setups. So you can issue, web service calls to this, Aegir API, and it'll just say, spin up this site with this name, delete this site with this name, whatever you want to do, and that will get processed as a web service call, and Aegir will just do it for you. Let's say, you've got other sites that are public facing, and they send messages to the, either Aegir behind your firewall, that kind of thing. That's one way of setting it up. I've actually personally been doing a lot of work on that stuff. You can actually host some other CMSs with Aegir, like CiviCRM, WordPress. It's not overly natural in the sense that, Aegir was initially written just for Drupal sites, so you kind of have to trick Aegir into thinking you're hosting Drupal. We'll talk a bit about a solution for that that's coming down the pipe a bit later. But right now, there are modules to do post CiviCRM and WordPress. Another big thing that everyone's crazy about now is HTTPS stuff using Let's Encrypt. So you can automatically get HTTPS certificates for all your sites. It's free. It's just a checkbox when you're provisioning or creating a new site. And it'll just go deal with the Let's Encrypt folks, get a certificate, set it up, rewrite your vhost. Easy peasy. So, we got that done a little while ago. Everyone loves it. It's great. It works really well. And like I mentioned, we have tons of other contrib modules to do all kinds of crazy things. So I believe that I made that a link. So when you're looking at these slides later, you can. But it's in the documentation site if you want.
Bit of history of the Let's Encrypt HTTPS certificate module was written at DrupalCamp 2 years ago.
Yeah, so Dean and I worked on that just over a year and got it done. So.
Well, I got a good part of it.
Most of it done.
And then it took a little while.
Somewhere to finalize it.
Yeah, exactly. We needed broader testing. That was basically. From an API standpoint, Aegir essentially provides all of the core APIs, right? It's Drupal on the front end and Drush on the back end. So if you've ever written a Drush extension, you should be pretty familiar with how things work on that basis. Create custom commands. You can hook into post and pre-hooks and stuff like that. Similar with Drupal core, so you can form alter stuff. You can do that sort of thing. The workflows can be customized in a similar way. So on the back end, you can hook into, before a verify happens, do this other thing, right? Before a site is installed, provision an S3 server via the AWS API, or an S3 instance, or whatever it's called. Anyway, so a lot of that stuff is available, and it makes for extending Aegir into sort of custom scenarios, something that's really feasible, and makes it relatively easy to manage that code base as well, right? It's just standard Drush code or standard Drupal modules. One of the things that we did a couple years ago when we came out with Aegir 3 was that because we have this front end and back end components, a lot of stuff is just on the front end, right? Some stuff is just on the back end, but most of the time if you're doing anything interesting, you're gathering data from the user on the front end and passing it to the back end to then pick up. So it might be like an API key to create an S3 instance or whatever, right? So to do that kind of thing, it used to be the case that you needed to have 2 Git repos and you had to deploy the Drupal part as part of a makefile or something like that, and then you had to deploy your Drush code separately because Drush doesn't have a package manager for Drush extensions. What we did was we created a way that you can actually embed the Drush code into your front-end code so that you only have one repository to manage, and then you can deploy it via Git or Drush makefiles or Composer, and Aegir will find it and bootstrap it into Drush on the back end. So it just makes it a little simpler to manage your code. It's all in one place, the front end and the back end stuff. You can see it's one commit history, for example, for the changes to your custom code as you start to alter the behavior of it programmatically.
We've got 10 minutes left, by the way.
Okay, I don't know how much further we have.
Yeah, let's go and see where we are. Go to the next.
Yeah, so here's those are a couple of examples of stuff.
So we're at the end anyway. Great.
Yeah. So Aegir 3 is the stable deployment. It's on Drupal 7. It's been around for quite a while now. I think 4 years at least, I think. Anyway, John here has been working on Aegir 4, and essentially the main thrust of it is moving from Drush as a backend to Symfony. As Drupal 8 is becoming more and more adopted, Drush is dropping the global Drush install. Okay, so it used to be you'd install Drush in one place and it would speak to all of your Drupal sites. That's no longer the case, especially with the move to Symfony in Drupal 8. Because of the way autoloaders work and various technical issues along those lines. And so he's largely rewritten the back end in Symfony, currently keeping the front end more or less as is. While it's listed here as a medium-term solution, I believe the intention is actually to more or less fork that and keep it going as one approach to continuing to do this kind of provisioning, and that would be provision 4.
John's going to be doing a talk on that tomorrow.
Yeah.
About Aegir 4, provision 4. So yeah, go to that if you're interested.
Exactly. So I'll let him demo that. It's really quite nifty stuff. In the meantime, I've been working on a complete rewrite, and I was hoping to be able to demonstrate it here today, but I decided to be a little bit stupid in the end, is what it came down to, and upgrade everything to the latest Ubuntu, and that broke some stuff. And so it's actually all working again, but I don't have it on my laptop. So I'll have it later today, and if you want, track me down, I'll be able to show you what it looks like. Essentially, it's a complete rewrite in Drupal 8 as a front end. And instead of Drush, it's using Ansible by default on the back end. The intention is to have swappable backends so that you could, for example, have your front end use Ansible to provision Kubernetes and then start deploying sites to Kubernetes on a container pod-based scenario. It replaces what we're currently calling our ghetto queue, which is basically just a database table that collects and maintains all of the variables that we're passing from the front end to the back end, as we saw earlier. And it replaces it with a full-blown task queue, in this case Celery, which is written in Python. And the intention is to move away from sort of this Drupal-centric approach, right? So it's going to still be Drupal on the front end. It's going to support Drupal out of the box as its sort of first and primary hosted application. But since we're no longer sort of embedded within Drush on the back end, Ansible is a general purpose configuration management system. And so rather than trying to trick Aegir into thinking that a WordPress is a Drupal in order to be able to manage WordPresses, this would actually natively allow you to do that. And the intention is to kind of break it down so that instead of having, we still have this concept of tasks, but tasks become much smaller. So a task would be something like rewrite a vhost and restart the web server, right? And then the thing that gathers the tasks would be operations. That's the thing that you would run, which would be install a site, and that would run a task to create a database, create a vhost, restart the server, and so forth. The idea being there that for a WordPress server or a WordPress site, you still need to write a vhost and you still need to provision a database. So why replicate that functionality? And the only parts that would be different is running Drush site install versus WP CLI, whatever the WordPress component would be, right? So that's something that actually works as it stands. It's relatively stable. What it mostly needs is taking all of the workflows that we have in Aegir 3 and replicating them in this new framework. The idea being that replace the framework, but keep the workflows that we know work, and then we'll be able to iterate on the workflows as we now have a more modern framework to work with that gives us a lot more flexibility. One of the things that I really liked about this is as I was starting to look at how can I re-implement some of these things, there's that reset password button, right, that we would use in the front end to get a login link. And so I started to implement that in the same way that we do in Aegir currently, which is click a button, it creates a task, that task gets run on the back end, the URL gets posted into the front end as a field that then gets displayed as a link, and then you can click on that link, right? That takes about 10 or 15 seconds. It works. It's always worked. It's a nice feature for Aegir 3. What I realized, though, is that now that we have a full-featured queue, I can click that link, it can dispatch that operation, and just redirect me immediately. there's no need to have it go through the task queue because we really don't care about the drush output. The drush output is the link that I'm being redirected to. And so you can have these kind of special case tasks that essentially just immediately redirect you to a login, like to being logged into the site. It's a really nifty, the new things that you can do when you have full-blown implementations of the kinds of components that you're using instead of having written everything ourselves, which is essentially what happened because all of this started about 11 years ago. And back then, things like Puppet and Chef and stuff were just starting if they existed at all. And so now we're working with second and third generation configuration management systems. And so it's really a pleasure to work on this stuff. So I really encourage you to take a look when we have a chance. I'm hoping to get an alpha out this weekend to make it a little easier for people to take a look. And once I get it up on running on my laptop and Colan's laptop and Derek's laptop and anybody else, we can take a look and demonstrate a bit how it works and go from there. And yeah, we're running low on time.
We have 2 or 3 minutes, so any questions or discussion, comments, thoughts?
I don't, one thing, we didn't plan much time for people to get from one session to the next. Good thing they're all, most of them are right here. I will say the one thing I'm curious about is just the overall ecosystem and governance structure. I mean, there's co-ops, there's a few big companies out there. Just, could you in 1 or 2 minutes summarize, what's that look like these days?
So there's the project and then there's the co-op. The co-op's intention is for the agencies that depend a lot on Aegir for their business. So I do a lot of consulting on Aegir, as do a number of other folks. Most of us are maintainers of the project, and it's not coincidental, but it's not required that you be a maintainer to be a part of the co-op. The co-op's idea was to provide professional support for it. So that's starting. We haven't really been putting a lot of marketing effort behind it. It exists, it's incorporated, we're operating, but it's not a priority for each of us right now. We're kind of focusing on other things, but we do have some clients. We're working with them very well. They're very happy with the support and so forth. But that's kind of where it stands.
So that's that, but then there's companies outside that co-op not participating in that co-op and that are doing a lot of business.
Yeah, there's a number. So there's some large shops.
Omega 8 is still around.
Omega 8 is still around. John is launching something with DevShop. There's a number of rather large consulting shops, like the ones who are working with NASA, for example. That's Mobomo. They work with U.S. government agencies all the time. So they have quite a bit of expertise. One of our maintainers works there. So yeah, no, there's a number of shops that are out there doing that. That's kind of where things are. So there's, I'd say, about a dozen shops that have some level of expertise in it. I'd say half a dozen that are sort of participating on a regular basis with the ongoing development and maintenance, and then others that kind of participate in a little bit more bursty of a fashion, right? So.
Last question on the adoption right now. Have we plateaued, dipped, and then maybe seen some growth? What are you seeing right now?
I haven't looked recently. I believe it's probably relatively flat. I don't think we've been tracking any particular growth. Like, we haven't been out there promoting it a whole lot either.
I mean,
It's slow and steady. If you go to the Drupal.org,
yeah,
it's not.
Like
Drupal.org stats are a little jumpy, but it's definitely a slow but steady trend.
yeah, like I've got some client work I'm doing for various organizations that they're getting Aegir set up, but it's not public yet. It's not done, that kind of stuff. So it's like slow growth would be good.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can look at the host master page on Drupal.org for the stats.
Yeah, most of the times that I deploy it as well, we're deploying it behind a VPN, and it's not going to be reporting to Drupal.org, so it wouldn't be reflected in those.
That's some of the enterprise stuff I've been doing. It's internal, so.
Yeah.
Thank you so
All
much. It's 2:29.
Yeah.
Let the other
Last thing you mentioned governance first. There is none. We should maybe do that.
There is.
It's very loose.
There's some, but.
Already for governance.
Thanks. Yeah, any more questions? I guess talk to us after. We have to leave the room, so thanks a lot.